You are listening to End of Life University podcast, real talk about life and death. This is episode number 125. Welcome to End of Life University podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Karen Wyatt, hospice physician, author, and educator. In this podcast, I share thoughtful conversations with experts in various fields related to dying and death, and informative teaching sessions on preparing for the end of life by living fully today. Thank you so much for joining me. Today I'm going to be talking a little bit about how to have a peaceful death, and this episode is kind of a follow-up on a blog that I released in the last week called Why Some People Don't Die in Peace. But today I wanted to really focus on, well, what if you want to die in peace? How can you actually do that? What does it take to die in peace? So that'll be coming up in just a few minutes. But first I have an announcement to make. You may have heard this already if you're a regular listener, but this year for 2018, I have created a reading group, an online reading group called A Year of Reading Dangerously. And for the whole year, we'll be reading one book a month, all related in some way or another to death and dying. And it's been enormously popular. I'm really excited that so far, the last time I checked, 675 people have signed up for the group. We have a really active Facebook group going on, and there are, I know there are over 250 people who've joined the Facebook group, and they're having conversations and networking and getting connected there through Facebook. And so if you're interested in being part of the reading group, it's simple. There's no obligation. You can sign up. You'll just get an email each month on the first day of the month that tells you which book we're reading, gives you a little description of it. And then at the very end of each month, I'll be scheduling a live conversation about the book. And I'm happy to announce that so far I have received confirmations from 6 authors who are going to be attending those live discussion sessions. And so this will be really fun. The authors will actually be there to answer questions about their book. We can have a really fascinating discussion with them about the book. So anyway, I think that'll be something really fun to offer as part of this group. And again, if you can't attend those live sessions, they'll be recorded, and you'll get the recording by email also, so you can listen at any time and tune in on those conversations. So it's a book group that you can participate as much or as little as you want. You can read all 12 books. You can read different books. You can read one book for the whole year if you want to. You can come to the discussions if you want or not. Or you can just listen to them later. You can join the Facebook group and get really active and be involved in discussions there with other readers, or not. Just do this totally on your own and be in your own space reading the books and thinking about them. So if you're interested and you want to sign up, you can go to this webpage. It's on my website, eoluniversity.com/year of reading, and there are no hyphens, no punctuation, no spaces, just year of reading as the page that you'll go to. There's also a link to that page on the home page of the website, eoluniversity.com too, so you can link to it to get inside to that page. On that page will be listed the books we're reading, plus downloadable discussion guides for those books each month, so you can kind of read along and look at the questions on the discussion guide to use as you read the book. So you can sign up and you'll get the emails every month. If all you want to do is take a look at which books we're reading, you can go to Year of Reading on eoluniversity.com/year of reading, and you can see the books there. I've listed the first 6 months so far. I'm still finalizing the next 6 and trying to connect with authors and see if they can come, if they can be with us, and when, and the best months to schedule their books, that sort of thing. So that's why it isn't fully laid out for the entire year yet. But I hope you'll join us for a year of reading dangerously. So far, it's really fun. Our January book is When Breath Becomes Air by Paul Kalanithi, an absolutely gorgeous book that I have really loved reading. And I can tell you, for me personally, just creating this group has really stimulated me to start reading more books, because I used to love reading, and I almost always was reading at least 2 books at any given time. But for the last couple of years, I've just gotten so busy, I've kind of let my reading fall by the wayside. And this has been a great inspiration to just spend a little time before I go to bed every night reading, and I'm really enjoying that. So anyway, a year of reading dangerously. Join us if you want to. And you can also check the show notes for this episode. The previous episodes, and probably every episode from here on out, will have a link for a year of reading dangerously for the rest of the year. So feel free, you can join us at any time and take a look at those books. Next, please remember that this podcast is sponsored by generous donations made through my page at patreon.com/EOLU. And Patreon is spelled patreon.com/EOLU. These contributions help defray some of the expenses of creating, producing, and broadcasting this podcast and the End of Life University interview series. In addition, when you make a pledge of even $1 per month, it lets me know that you enjoy and benefit from this work I'm doing. And that emotional and spiritual support helps keep me going week after week. This week, I would like to thank my latest patron, Cheryl Durden. Thank you so much, Cheryl, for signing up and becoming a new supporter of End of Life University. I really appreciate it. Those of you who decide you want to sign up, every month you'll get the Hospice Happy Hour Q&A recording that I'll make for you, where I answer questions that get submitted to me, and I record the answers and send it out to you, just, something interesting to listen to. And if you're already on the Patreon page, you can go to eoluniversity.com/questions, and that's where you can enter your questions each month for me to answer. Then each month you'll get that recording. If you are a platinum supporter, which is $5 per month or more, you will receive access all year to all of the recordings from End of Life University this year, all the replays from the interview series that I do for people who are just signed up on the email list. Those replays expire after a couple of weeks, but they will be permanently available for those of you who have become platinum supporters on Patreon. So that's just one of the little benefits that you'll receive by being a supporter. And once again, thanks to Cheryl Durden. Thanks to everyone else who has come on board and they're offering support. It makes all the difference to me. And again, you can go to patreon.com/EOLU. And so with that being said, we'll move on to the talk today, how to have a peaceful death. Because as I said, I wrote a blog last week, about why some people don't die in peace, because I've thought about that quite a lot after being a hospice physician and attending many deaths, many in hospice, but also some for non-hospice patients when I was on call and on rotations in the hospital, and even deaths of family members and friends. I've had a chance to witness and observe. And so I can say partly it's because of the majority of the deaths I've been part of have been through hospice. The majority of the deaths I've witnessed have actually been peaceful. And I believe that hospice care has a lot to do with it, because those patients are receiving good pain management, at least in the hospice I worked for. We made sure their pain was under control. They had regular visits from our staff. But also, our hospice staff did a great job of attending to emotional and spiritual issues for patients in hospice, listening to them and helping them resolve some of the unfinished business of life. So I believe that's why the majority of those patients I saw in hospice had peaceful deaths, but I've seen plenty of deaths from patients who were not in hospice, who were in the ICU, in a hospital or a nursing home, that were not so peaceful. So I've done a lot of thinking because I don't think it's just hospice that makes the difference. I definitely think hospice contributes to hospice makes it possible for a peaceful death to happen. But without a hospice, it's still possible to die peacefully. And I just wanted to talk a little bit about that. What can we do now to ensure that when our time comes, we're more likely to have a peaceful dying process rather than being tormented and angry and filled with negative emotions at that time. And so I've kind of broken it down first into some of the things on the physical realm that we can do. And the most important thing that comes up for me then is that we plan ahead, because by and large, the patients who don't end up on hospice, who end up dying in the hospital or in ICU, or possibly even a nursing home, may be people who haven't planned ahead and haven't completed an advance directive. So by not giving instructions to other people about what kind of care they would like to receive at the end of life, they may end up receiving far more care than they had hoped for or wanted because no one else knew what their wishes were. And so sometimes those patients end up, I think, rather miserable at the end of life, but partly because they didn't anticipate what could possibly happen, and they didn't make plans. They didn't talk to anyone about their plans. If they had it to do over again, those very patients might say, oh my gosh, I would have let everyone know. Just keep me at home. Bring in hospice. Take care of me there. Don't do these extreme measures to try to keep me alive at the end of life. But because that work and that processing wasn't done before they reached the time of their dying, they were not able to have what they may have chosen for themselves if they had spent the time making that choice. So my first recommendation is that every one of us needs to do some planning ahead. We need to stop and think about it and think through what we want and plan for what we want. And we need to put it in writing. And we also need to have conversations with all the important people in our lives, family members, physicians, clergy, attorneys, anyone in our lives who might be present during our dying process and may have a voice for us. We need to make sure they know what our wishes are. And that also includes selecting the right person as a healthcare proxy. And I've talked about this before, the importance of choosing the very best person for you who is the most likely to represent your wishes. So, and that takes some careful consideration and thought. And I will link to a previous podcast I recorded about that. But you can't just list any person. You can't just list any one of your children or any relative as a potential healthcare proxy. You need to choose the very best person, the right person for you, and you need to make sure that they agree and that they're willing to be your proxy. Those are crucial. So that person is the person who's going to stand up for you and speak for you. If things are headed in a direction that you may not want, you need that person to be strong enough to step up and say, no, that is not what my father wanted or my mother wanted. That isn't right. We're not going that route. This is what my parent wanted to have happen at the end of life. So, again, you can listen to that previous episode about choosing a healthcare proxy if you haven't already done that for yourself. But those are crucial, crucial steps that should be done. I mean, it's never too soon, honestly, to make these choices. Once you're 18, you already need to have a healthcare proxy chosen because anything can happen. And so you already need to have named someone who will speak up for you. If you don't, the courts will name someone on your behalf, and that may not be the person who has your best interests in mind. So that's the first step on the physical level, is doing the planning and putting in writing what you want when you're dying. What do you want to have happen to you? What kind of care do you want to receive? But on this physical realm, there's so many other things that should be taken care of. And one that I just wrote down, there's been this a book going around that I've been reading about a lot. I haven't read it yet, but it's about a process called Swedish death cleaning, which is going through your house basically and cleaning out your belongings and your possessions and giving things away before you die, so that your loved ones don't have to do that for you after you die. I actually think that's an amazing process to help you come to terms with the impermanence of life, to really start it again. It's probably never too early to start doing that, to start going through your possessions and going through your house and thinking about, do I even need this any longer? Is this even important to me? Is this something that I could get rid of, that I could pass along to someone else who might really benefit from it and really use it? And so I think that's an excellent way to start processing the fact that life is limited. It does come to an end, and so does, I guess, this part of your life with this particular possession needs to be able to come to an end, and you need to be able to let go of it and move on and let that possession go to someone else who will cherish it now and use it and let it pass out of your life. And so I think this idea of death cleaning is a great way to start to prepare yourself for the end of life. And I want to just use my mom as an example, and one of the reasons this is all coming up for me right now is yesterday, the day before I'm recording this, was just the 5-year anniversary of my mom's death. So Mom is very much on my mind. She is every day, but more so right now. I'm kind of reliving 5 years ago when I was caring for her at the end of life, and that day when she took her very last breath. But I can say wholeheartedly that my mom had a peaceful dying process. Now, that is not to say that it was all blissful. That is not to say that that it wasn't challenging and difficult keeping her at home and in her own bed, because of just all of the things that happen as a physical body is dying, and restlessness and trying to climb out of bed, and various changes that happen in the body and in the mind as the dying process is taking place. So it's not, when I say peaceful death, I don't mean that there's just bliss and the two of us sat for 5 days smiling and meditating the entire time, because it was still a lot of work for her and a lot of work for me. And we worked together as a team to help her get through this passage. And it is a passage, and it is a journey, and it does require work, and it isn't all easy or, as I said, blissful. But the difference is that it was peaceful. In her state of being, in her mental attitude and her approach to the dying, even though the physical process took work, there was peace in her spirit and in her soul as she was dying, and that emanated from her and filled the entire room, that peacefulness about the process that was happening, even when it was uncomfortable, even when there was restlessness, and even when when she got confused and tried to climb out of bed, there was still peacefulness in the process. So this is what I'm talking about. And I want to make sure when we use terms like this, like peaceful death, that listeners really understand that, because some people may have a misconception that that means that in the dying process, a peaceful death might mean there's never a moment of pain, there's never a moment of discomfort, never a moment of any kind of disturbance or disruption, because that really isn't true. The dying process always involves ups and downs, and it's always a process and always a journey, and it always requires work on the part of the person who's dying and the part of those who are providing care. Okay, so I just wanted to make sure that that word peaceful doesn't get misconstrued. But the other thing that I believe what contributed to my mom's peacefulness as she was dying is the fact that she started preparing for her death 5 years before she died. She had the realization that she was going to die. She thought sooner. She didn't think it would be 5 years. I think she thought it would be fairly soon. So she planned her entire funeral. She called the funeral parlor that our family had always used over the years, had them come and visit her at home. She prepaid for a package. She picked out her own coffin. She even picked out the floral arrangements and ordered and paid for those in advance. She had a video made in advance of photographs from her photo album. She even had little programs made that didn't have a day of death on them, but had the date of her birth. And they were like little cards that she wanted to be given out to everyone who came to her funeral with a message from her in the card. It was very beautiful. So she did a huge amount of work. Making all these plans for her funeral. She listed all the speakers that she wanted to talk at her funeral. And so that was a huge amount of planning. In addition to that, she filled out the 5 wishes form. She and I had numerous talks over and over again about what kind of care she wanted at the end of life, and she made it very clear that she wanted to be at home in her own bed, and she wanted me to be taking care of her. Now, I didn't know if I could honestly promise her that it would work out that way, just because life is uncertain and you have no idea when death will happen or how it might happen, because who knows, she might have been traveling in a car somewhere and in a car accident and died as a result of the accident, So there are no guarantees. That I couldn't guarantee her, absolutely, you'll be at home in your own bed with me taking care of you. But what I did say is, I know that's what you want, and I am fully on board. And it is 100% my intention. If I can make that happen, I'm going to make that happen. That was the assurance I could give her, and that was enough to satisfy her. That felt good to her. So I knew what she wanted, and my brother did as well. And it was very clear to us where she wanted to be when it was time for her to die. I just mentioned the idea of death cleaning, but my mom on her own started doing some of that. Now, she was in very frail health, so she couldn't get out of the house. She couldn't, go to the thrift store to give things away. But what she did, every time she had a visitor, she would take them primarily to her little kitchen and dining area. She had a whole china cabinet full of all kinds of silver and different kinds of servingware. I mean, she would go there and say, please take something. What would you like? Please take something. And it was really sweet. So she started giving away as much as she could in her circumstances, since she physically wasn't able to box things up and haul it down to the thrift store. But she gave pieces away to anyone and everyone who came to visit her, pretty much left with something. And sometimes she knew what she wanted to give to that person. She already had it picked out and already knew what she wanted them to have. Other times she let them make the choice. It was very sweet, though, and very beautiful. And for all of those people who received something from my mom, how special it was that they received it from her hands, felt her love for them as she gave it to them. And so wow, way beyond receiving something after she had already died, to actually get it from her while she's still alive and willing to give it up and let go of it. So this idea of death cleaning, which I saw my mom doing over those years, probably not to the extent that is recommended in this book, or that perhaps it takes place in Sweden in a lot of homes, because my mom still, when she died, she still had a house full of stuff, literally full, every closet and every space full of stuff. So I can't say it was cleaned out, but she definitely did her work of giving away some of those items. So I highly recommend that practice as you start to plan ahead and start to prepare for the idea that you'll die someday. And again, it's not too early to start. We should probably be doing this kind of cleaning all along as we go, every few months or at least once a year, getting rid of the things that we don't use anymore, that we don't need, so that our life isn't cluttered up with lots and lots of old things that are kind of disregarded now and not even being used. So another thing on talking about this physical realm of our existence, to think ahead in the future, is how are you going to live? Are you going to be able to stay in your own home? If you try to stay in your own home, who's available who might help you and assist you with that? Because it's hard for an older person to live home alone. My mom had a very active church group and a few women from there that she was very, very close to. One in particular bought groceries for her every week. And so my mom would give her the list of what she needed, and this woman would shop for her and bring the groceries back for her. She also helped Mom with laundry, coming in and, helping her do her laundry, though she didn't have very much, but she assisted with that. So she knew that she had friends in her community that she could rely on who would assist her at the very end of her life if and when she needed that. And I think it's really important for all of us to think about that. Where do I live? What is my support network like? Who is here? And how will I get help if I need it later in my life? And if I need to hire someone to help me, have I set aside money for that? Do I know that I'm in a position financially that I can afford to pay that? If I need to be in an assisted living or long-term care facility, have I figured out how that might get paid for as well? So we need to be thinking ahead, and we need to be thinking through some of these difficult questions. It's not really good enough to say, oh, I'll just stay in my own home, because that may not be possible for some of us. We may not be physically able to care for ourselves in our own homes. So we need to think through all the possibilities, and in terms of our physical safety and physical well-being, where could we be? Who could help us? How is that going to work out? And so it's important that we're even able to sit down and think that through. Think through that process, like what happens if I'm too weak or feeble to clean my house, but I can still get out of bed and get dressed. I could live in my house and be there if I have some help. Just think that scenario through. What would happen? How could you get help? Could you hire someone? Are there people who would come in and help you out? I think it's extremely valuable to already have processed that and to already have some idea of what your alternatives might be. And so along with that, in the physical realm, go all things like estate planning, leaving a will, setting up a trust, whatever it takes to make sure that your finances are in order for later in life. And another part of it, this is something my mom did in addition to planning her funeral. She created a file, a little accordion file and a notebook with all of her information in it. She gave us everything. She left it for my brother and I, all of her insurance policies, the deed to her house, the title to her car, my dad's Army discharge papers and his death certificate and both of their birth certificates. Like, she gathered every document she could think of that we could possibly need, all of her banking information, all of her investment information. She had the names and phone numbers of all her attorney, her doctors, all the people that we might need to contact. Also, she had a list for us of who to call when she died, of all the people out of town who would need to be notified that she died, who might not otherwise hear it by word of mouth. She had all of that put together for us, as I said, in a spiral notebook and an accordion file. And it was so well organized. It was just amazing. But she'd obviously been working on it over time. And so this was part of her death work, preparing for her death, thinking about what's going to happen, like what will my kids need to deal with when I die, and how can I make that easier for them. And that's what she told me over and over again. She did all of this out of love for us because she wanted it to be easier for us when she was gone. And what an incredible gift that was for us, because I can tell you she saved my brother and I so much heartache and so much hassle by doing all of that work herself. But at the same time, she was benefiting herself so much because she was creating more and more peace for herself. She was tying up loose ends. She was taking care of all of the matters of her life and putting things in place and in order so that when it was time for her to go, she didn't have a huge list of questions on her mind like, oh no, what about this? What about that? Oh, do the kids know about this other bank account that I have? Do they know about my safety deposit box? What about this? I just remembered it. No, because she'd spent years thinking through all of those things and writing everything down. She really, I can say she left almost no stone unturned. There was almost nothing that she hadn't thought of, except we found a couple of things that she had on automatic bill pay, that I think she forgot about, some vitamins that she was ordering that got sent to her every 3 months, and I think she forgot about that. So the vitamins arrived 3 months after she died, and that's how we discovered it when there was a package at her door that we didn't know why it was coming in, so that money was automatically being taken out of her account. But anyway, that was maybe one thing that slipped through the cracks. She just took care of all of these issues and all of these loose ends. She took responsibility for every part of her life. And indeed, that was a profound gift to my brother and me. So that's one thing I recommend that any one of us should be able to do, and we should be able to start it no matter what age we are, even if we're in perfect health, if we're willing to recognize, yep, someday it's my time. We should be able to start getting things ready and getting things in order and doing this work and taking responsibility for our lives and tying up those loose ends. So those are all things on this physical realm of existence that I wanted to talk about. Next, I wanted to move on to kind of the mental realm, the mental preparation we can do for death. And I think it's a great idea for us to start learning whatever we need to know about death and dying, because what we already know might be limited. It might be limited by the deaths that we've experienced in the past, and those may not be very representative of death nowadays in this more modern era, and they may just not have informed us very clearly of what death and dying are like. And so I think it's always a great idea to do some reading, do some thinking, kind of prepare yourself mentally for what that process could be like. There are some amazing books out there, and I already mentioned the reading group, A Year of Reading Dangerously, where we're going to cover a lot of these books that will be great exposure to the idea of death and hearing stories about it, and hearing other people's experiences with death and dying as a way of just learning as an outsider to it right now, learning about what is death like. You could also attend a death cafe if there's one in your area, where you can go and talk with other people about death and listen to other people share their ideas and thoughts. It's a great way to have conversations about death. You can watch films. There's some great documentary films out there. On Netflix is the documentary Extremis that is streaming that I think you should be able to access if you have Netflix. You can look around for workshops in your area or classes, people just hosting events to talk about end-of-life issues and death and dying. And those could be hosted in churches or funeral homes or hospices or hospitals, anywhere in your community. So you may need to pay attention and start looking around to see if you see flyers or see announcements in the newspaper for events going on that you could attend, just to improve your own awareness of death and dying and issues around it. And maybe learn some new things, learn about green burial and home funerals and things that you might never have thought about before. So on the mental level, I think you can prepare yourself by deciding that you're really going to study dying and death and learn as much as you can about it. And this will help you also to think more often about death and invite death in as kind of a normal, open aspect of life that it's okay to think about, and it's okay to have death present in your thoughts and in your awareness, and to observe death around you wherever you see it. So I think doing some of this work of learning whatever you can and getting educated about issues related to the end of life can really help you with this mental aspect of preparing for your own death so that you can be at peace when you die. Some of the people I saw who were not at peace were definitely terrified of death and had not spent any time thinking about it or allowing themselves to think about it. And this includes some people with a terminal diagnosis. Even though they knew they had an illness that was most certainly going to lead to their death, they did not spend any time thinking about death and dying or thinking about that reality. They continued to shut it out of their minds and deny it. And I think denial is a useful defense mechanism in many ways for us. At times we're not ready to look at things, and denial can help us to gradually absorb reality and gradually adjust to it over time. But I think if we get entrenched in denial, we may be missing opportunities to really stretch our boundaries and grow and embrace reality a little bit more and prepare ourselves for that reality. So again, this mental readiness for dying and death, I think, is very, very important. And again, if you're preparing on the physical realm for dying, then you're also preparing mentally for that. Those go hand in hand. But I wanted to separate out some things you can do to learn about death and dying that can also help to bring you peace and help you feel more prepared at the end of life. And the next area that I wanted to discuss is emotional preparedness for the end of life. And here I'm talking about your emotional wounds, your past history that you might be holding on to, relationships that may have been disrupted by conflict that have never been healed. These are some of the emotional issues that can cause you to not be at peace at the end of life. If there are people in your life that you've had a falling out with, even if it was 20 years ago, but you still haven't resolved it and haven't found peace with that person, I've seen very often those relationships rise right to the surface for people who are dying, and they feel compelled to try to heal the relationship or make amends somehow. And it's difficult to do that that when you're on your deathbed. It's difficult. It's challenging. I mean, many times in hospice, we helped people make phone calls. We called old friends or relatives that hadn't been spoken to in years and asked them if there's any way they could come to visit the patient. Would they talk to the patient on the phone? We really tried to help facilitate that healing because people felt desperate sometimes at the very end of life, like, I just have to do this. I have to make this better before I die. And because it literally was disturbing their peace of mind and peace of heart, and they felt it powerfully at the very end of life. So my advice is to start doing that emotional healing work now. And even though it doesn't necessarily have to be connected with thinking about when will I die, because you might think, well, I'll forgive that person right before I die. I don't need to forgive them now. I can tell you your entire life will benefit if you start doing some of this forgiveness work earlier in life. It's like cleaning out your house and cleaning out your closets. It's cleaning out these stored areas of old resentment and bitterness and anger that are kind of filling up all the inner spaces you have. And when you start to clear those out by forgiving people and letting go of things from the past, you actually have so much more room within you for joy and love and for really amazing, happy experiences in life. And so we really just make ourselves miserable when we hang on to old pain, old wounds, old injuries from people, and we can't get over it, and we don't want to let them off the hook, and we feel like they should have been punished, they owe us something, and we don't want to see them just get away with whatever it is they did to us. But the fact is, we are only torturing ourselves by holding on to all of that negativity. So any work that you can do now to release some of that pain from the past and to heal some of your old wounds, anything you can do now is going to be helpful for you when you reach the end of life, because you won't be on your deathbed desperately thinking, oh my gosh, get my sister here. I've got to figure out how are we going to patch things up after 30 years? How are we ever going to talk to each other again and make this better? So give it some thought and see if you could start working on healing those old resentments now. And it might be that you need to forgive people. It might be that you need to make amends for someone that you hurt, something that you did in the past that you don't feel forgiven for yet. And you might need to reach out with apologies, or at least with some attempt of trying to make things better. And I can guarantee you, every moment that you spend trying to reconcile and forgive and letting go of the past is going to have a huge payoff for you. It will benefit you greatly. You'll be amazed of how much less burdened you feel in your day-to-day life, because you, without knowing it, you're carrying around this huge load of baggage that is just below the surface of your consciousness every day. It's not like you're thinking about it every day, but you're carrying it with you in the subconscious mind, and it is weighing you down. So if you have issues, if you feel like you're not very efficient, you're not getting things done that you need to get done, you're always behind, it could be that you're being slowed down so much by the baggage you're carrying. And I guarantee you, each time you remove something from that load of baggage, you will feel the difference in the weight you're carrying. You'll feel the difference in the lightness in the way you live your life, and the new space that you create within you that can be filled up now with light and joy and love. So do the work now to make amends, to forgive, and to let go of those resentments from the past. So that is how you can make huge strides in preparing yourself for a peaceful death if you take care of all of those issues, because they are major disruptors at the end of life for most people. All the issues they held on to all those years, do not serve them well at all in their last days and weeks of life. So start doing your emotional work now, healing, forgiveness, letting go. It can only benefit you. And the fourth area that I wanted to talk about is the spiritual aspect of life. And I'm not talking about religion, because when I speak about spiritual, I'm talking about the part of you that is beyond the mind, beyond your emotions, beyond the physical body. And I don't necessarily feel that being religious has anything to do with that part of you. It can, but it may not. And so I'm not advocating here that you practice a religion or find a religion, though for some people that's actually, religion is one of the pathways for growing spiritually. And if that's right for you and your choice and your path, that's perfect. But when I talk about the spiritual aspect of you, I'm not necessarily talking about anything to do with any kind of religion or practicing a religion. I'm talking about how you find meaning in the life that you have. What brings meaning to your life? And, as I've written in my book, what really matters to you? What is most important to you in your life? So this is going to take some thought. And for a lot of people, the idea of meaning, finding meaning, is sort of abstract. And they think, I don't even get that, I don't even get what that is saying, to try to find meaning in life. And so again, I'll use the term, it's what really matters, what's most important to you. And it's also, how do you make sense of life? What framework do you use? What lens do you look at life through? And how does life make sense to you? And so you have probably heard on both sides of this issue, you've probably heard people say everything happens for a reason. And then you've probably also heard people say nothing happens for a reason. That's not true. That's crazy. And so there are people on both sides of that discussion. Does everything happen for a reason or not? Well, that is a question and an issue for you to think about in your own life, and for you to decide, how do I sit with that idea that there's a reason behind things that happen in my life? And what I say instead of saying everything happens for a reason, what I say is it's possible to find meaning in everything that happens. So rather than say, oh, wow, there was some reason for that. I was destined for that car accident. That's why it happened. It happened for a reason. No, to say, wow, I was in a car accident. What meaning can I find from that event? Because then that's not saying some other factor outside of me controlled my destiny and forced this accident to happen. It's saying, an accident happened. Now it's up to me to decide, can I find meaning in what happened or not? Maybe not. Maybe it's not always possible for everyone to find meaning in everything that happens. But rather than saying it all happened for a reason, I think it's a better choice to say, I was able to find meaning in what did happen to me. I'm not sure why it happened. I don't know, I don't know what caused it to happen, but I was able to find meaning in what happened to me. And so let me try to explain this in a simple way if I can. Several years ago, it was right after the book What Really Matters was released by the publisher and came out into the world, like just a few days afterwards, I had a bike accident and got a concussion and broke my collarbone. And so it was not very well timed from my perspective, because it was a time when I was supposed to be doing book signings and speaking and traveling to bookstores and promoting my book. And here I had this injury, and for several weeks I had headaches and bad symptoms from concussions. I wasn't able to work on my computer. I really had to stay at home. I had to kind of cancel a lot of events. It was terrible. And I was in despair about it initially, but I decided, like, wait a minute, what meaning can I derive from that? Now, I didn't say, well, that happened for a reason. I didn't say, well, God made me fall off my bike and have that crash. God made that accident happen. No, what I said was, this accident happened. How can I find meaning and make it meaningful to me? And so what I did was I just became a student of my injuries and a student of myself, observing myself as I went through this process of trying to heal and dealing with a head that was injured and wasn't functioning totally normally. I just was able to sit back and find peace about the whole thing and let it unfold. And rather than getting upset about it, I did that initially for a few days. I was upset because all my plans got disrupted and had to be thrown out. But once I reached the point of deciding, okay, I will make something meaningful from this. I'm going to observe and I'm going to learn whatever I can by this process that I'm going through. I was creating meaning as I went along. And ironically, what happened during this time when I thought, oh my gosh, now no one will buy my book because I can't be out there promoting it, a couple of really great things happened. I got a notification that a publisher in South Korea bought the rights to my book and was publishing it in Korean. And I also got interviewed by USA Today about my book. And I have no idea how that even happened because I wasn't out there. I wasn't calling people or emailing or doing anything to promote the book. I wasn't able to. I was too injured. But a reporter from USA Today heard about my book and called me and interviewed me about it. And it was all during that time of recuperation. And so the meaning for me, the primary lesson I learned is that, hey, I don't have control over most things that happen in my life. What I really have to do is learn to have equanimity about the events that happen and be in this state of sitting back and learning and observing and being fascinated about life itself and how it unfolds. Because life is always really interesting. Amazing things happen all the time. And if I'm in the position of watching that and witnessing it, I will get to see all of that. And I don't even have to take control over it or try to make things happen a certain way. I can just let it happen. So that was a huge lesson I learned from that accident, and that has served me really well ever since then. And I find myself constantly reminding myself to go back to that place of just being at equanimity. Don't try to control so much. Let go of everything and just watch and wait for whatever is coming next. Let it happen. Let it just unfold as it does. So for me, that's how I found meaning in that accident. And so I think it is within our ability, if we work at it, to find meaning in the events of our lives. But we have to be clear that that's our responsibility to find the meaning, and we have to do the work to find the meaning as well. So that's going to take a little bit of effort and maybe something new to us that we have to find a way to think about. Like for me, I use journaling. That's one of the ways that I get myself into a space where I can find that equanimity and watch and observe for meaningful things to happen and occur. And so you might have to find your place, your space, where you can begin to find meaning in the events of your life. The moment that you find that life is meaningful for you, that just being here on the planet, no matter what the condition of your health is, no matter what your finances are, no matter what other hardships befall you, the moment that you decide it is meaningful to be here and be alive in this moment, taking a breath right now, that's the moment when you stop fighting against life and you suddenly find that there is joy in everything that's happening around you. You can find joy and love everywhere in everything if you allow yourself to get into this place of equanimity and this place of seeing the meaning behind life. And I know this may not make sense to some of you. I know you may be sitting there thinking, what the heck is she talking about? So in some ways, this is something you have to experience for yourself in order to understand it. But I'm telling you about it so that if you have the opportunity, you may be able to gradually see this and sense this for yourself. And part of this idea of finding meaning in everything is that you also have to face your fears. And the fear of death is the greatest, ultimate fear for all of us. And psychologists say that the fear of death actually underlies every other fear. Every other fear that we have is really the fear of death that's just been disguised as something else, or it's just popping up through some other through some other means of manifesting itself. But the fear of death is the ultimate fear. When you confront the fear of death, you will be confronting all fear in your life. So if you want to go for the source of fear, if you could look at every individual fear. I have a fear of heights. I have a fear of closed-in spaces, whatever. You could look at each individual fear and try to analyze that and try to help yourself get through it. But if you really want to make a big impact, go right to death. Look at the fear of death. Once you confront that and you deal with your fear of death, the other fears are suddenly going to diminish and start to dissolve away. So go to the source and look at the fear of death. So this is where ultimately meaning comes from, in my mind, the idea of knowing my life is finite. I'm not here forever. I'm only here for a short time. I don't know how long it will be. And therefore, I need to make the most of each moment that I have right now, because I don't know how many moments there will be. So I need to maximize my opportunities. How can I take this all in? How can I experience everything that it has to offer? How can I be fully awake and alert and present for all of the events of my life and everything that's happened? Even when I go grocery shopping, which I could do half asleep because I know the grocery store so well, I could walk down the aisles and just grab stuff and throw it in my cart and check out without even thinking about it. But what if I'm awake and alert? And what if I'm in the store and I'm noticing the amazing colors of the vegetables and fruits in the produce section, which really, it's a thing of beauty. If you step back and just look at the produce in your grocery store and how it's displayed and arranged, the variety of shapes and sizes and colors, and not to mention tastes and smells of all of those vegetables and fruits, it's really spectacular. I love that. So you can go into the grocery store and be alert and awake and pay attention to everything around you and have the most amazing, profound experience of your life in the produce section right there. You can also notice all the diversity of the people who are in there shopping and see them like people, like how beautiful it is. They're picking out food for a special meal they're going to create, and they're thinking of how to feed their families and what kind of nourishing meal they could put together. Like, it's amazing. It's wonderful. So something as mundane as the weekly grocery run could turn into this incredible event that's full of joy and love and really living life in the moment and making the most of that moment of life. So that's just another example of what can happen when you decide, I'm going to live a life of meaning because I'm going to pay attention to everything I do, and I'm going to be present for it in every day, and I'm going to bring as much joy and as much love as I can to every moment. So that is my message behind all of this. And in truth, all the work that I do when I talk about death and dying and doing advanced directives and filling out paperwork, my real message is, you know what? Face your death and be ready for it so that you can love your life, so that your life is full of meaning and that you can love every moment. Because one of the very best ways to be at peace when you do die is to look back and know, man, I have had the best life. My life was just chock full of amazing things, of beauty, of wonder, of wisdom, of love, of joy, of laughter. And yes, I had pain and I had suffering and I had difficulties. I had losses. I had tears. I had painful times I wasn't sure I would survive. But when you put all of it together, what an amazing tapestry it is. And how incredible as you are laying down on your deathbed for the last time and you look back at this life that's so rich and so full, that is meaning. And that is a life that you can feel peaceful about letting go of because you've left behind this amazing legacy. You've done the best you could. You've lived this life to the fullest, to the very best of your ability. You made the most of every single opportunity you had in this lifetime. And there's no greater peace than knowing that. So I want to thank you for listening to me again today. This kind of content, it's really important to me to be able to share it because this is what's bubbling up in me all the time. Sometimes I get invited to go speak to doctors and I have to talk about medical issues, and that's not necessarily what is just bursting to come through me. And so I am so delighted to have a platform and to have listeners who will hear me say what my heart needs to say. And that's what I was talking about today and what was arising through me today. And I so appreciate you for being here, listening to these podcasts, and showing up to take this in. I really appreciate it. So thank you for your time and attention today. I'll just remind you again to sign up for a year of Reading Dangerously if you'd like to be in our reading group, which is super fun, and I think it's going to be a great year together. And go to patreon.com/EOLU if you want to become a supporter. Totally up to you, though. Also, if you enjoy the podcast, apparently it's really helpful if you leave a review on iTunes, and there's a link on the show notes. You can go right to a page that tells you how to leave the review, because I don't know, sometimes apparently that seems challenging in some ways. So thank you again. Thank you for listening and sharing with me. And remember, I'll be back next Monday with another episode. Every single Monday, I'll be here for you. And so until then, remember to face your fear. Be ready for anything that life decides to bring to you. And love your life. Love every moment of it. So until next week, take care and goodbye.